Fantastic. All right, wonderful. Well, I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen so we can get my PowerPoint up here. All right, I hope that everyone can see that. So I can see it, so hopefully you can too. So I am really excited to kind of announce we're just launching this book. My new book, The Humane Hoax, is just out. I have edited this volume. It's an anthology with 18 contributing chapters and authors, and I'm very, very excited to bring it to the world. And I thought I'd start with why I wrote the book. Why did I want to compile this book? And again, I didn't write it. I edited it. I wrote the intro and the conclusion and a chapter, but really it's a collaborative effort of many, many voices. So I've been researching this issue that I call the humane hoax. Others have called humane washing, the humane myth, that kind of language for about 20 years now. And I've been vegan myself for 33 years. And early in my advocacy work in the 90s, early 2000s, you didn't see the labels that you're seeing today. You would see labels on maybe meat that would be something like young or fresh, things like that. So they did use, some kind of marketing and labeling, but what we're seeing today is a huge shift in the market. And I believe that it is because vegans and animal advocates were very successful with very little. We had very few people, very little resources, very little money, but we were able to get the word out that something is not right about animal agriculture, right? And I think people are starting to kind of feel that. Understand that something's just not right, whether it be the antibiotic use or the environmental impact, whatever it is. They started questioning, right, the animal advocacy or animal agriculture sector. And so, because we were becoming successful, there is now this kind of response from the industry, right, with labels that we're seeing like cage-free and free range and organic and certified humane. There's lots and lots of labels now that are coming out that are meant to, of course, appease consumers, make them feel more comfortable with these products. I thought this was a really interesting trend that was happening through the 2000s. It was a bit concerning to me that I felt that it could be that it might lull consumers into thinking that there is a humane way to commodify animals. And I actually went into the research thinking that I was going to, be saying things like, well, free range is better, but going vegan's best. Things like that. Choosing, these humane labels is better, but going vegan's best. That is not what I found, and that's not what I learned. After 20 years of research and my first book, I wrote the first book actually on this issue, on humane washing, called The Ultimate Betrayal. That came out 10 years ago. And that book really was kind of a seminal work because it was, again, the first book on humane washing and the humane hoax. And there wasn't a whole lot of information out about it then. But that has really grown. Not only has the industry grown, the labels and this marketing has certainly grown to the point where now you see cage-free labels on, muffins at the coffee shop or in a regular just grocery store. It used to be just the, health food stores, alternative stores. No, now you really are seeing these labels popping up everywhere. And so I wrote that first book. And I actually started a project called the Humane Hoax Project with Alistair Van Cleek of the Microsanctuary movement. And we started this project to raise awareness around this issue, to get more people to understand what the truth is behind these labels. And then, I started seeing more people writing about it, more people talking about it. And I thought how wonderful it would be to start to collect essays that could be compiled together into an anthology that could really show the issue from so many different angles, so many different perspectives. And that's what I did with the Humane Hoax that I have right here. So it's finally in my hands. And actually it's been a really long time coming because, I started this project long before the pandemic. And well, not long before, but 2020, 2018, maybe around then is when I started collecting essays. So it's been this kind of ongoing process, 2019. And then the pandemic pushed publishing back. So that's why, it's taken quite a while, but we're finally here. And, I'll just say that, I love that people are still reading books. I don't want to mention that. That is a really wonderful thing in my mind. I think books are a way to really embody an issue, right? I mean, we're now in this social media kind of quick, memes and videos and TikTok and everything so fast. And it's good to get the message out that way too. I mean, absolutely, of course, we need to do that. But I think it's really important as well to have books because it's a way to really sit with the issue, right? And really embody it, really get the feeling for an issue. So I hope that you consider buying this book and enjoying it that way. I also really want to thank Lantern Publishing, the publishing house that published the book, Lantern Publishing and Media, for believing in the project, for believing in me, and for publishing the book. And they're wonderful. They're an all-vegan publishing house, so I recommend checking them out and buying the book directly from them if you can. And it's been doing really well. Actually, this book, when it first came out in late April, was #1 on the Amazon new releases for animal rights category. So it was #1 for a week, or the first week that it was out. So I was really excited about that. I was just on Unchained TV with Jane Velez Mitchell talking about it. Mark Beckoff, who is a just legendary animal emotion writer, has written wonderful books on animal emotion. He has a column in Psychology Today Online, and he wrote a review on Psychology Today Online. So it's been doing really well, very excited about it. And we're going to talk a bit about it today. I won't go into too much. I don't want to spoiler the book, but we'll get into the Humane Hoax. So I'll talk a little about the book as well. So what is the Humane Hoax? So as I have here on the thing, and now the Zoom little thing is blocking it. Here we go. The mindset that there is a wide range of better ways to breed and slaughter animals to produce animal products. And so, this is a quick definition. It's really this false sense that there's some improvement in the industry, and either ethically or environmentally. And humane washing, greenwashing, these are other words for the Humane Hoax. But in a larger sense, you can kind of break it down into 3 different sections, 3 different parts. And the first part is humane washing. And that has to do with the labeling and the language around how animal products are marketed. So it could be a label, it could be a website, it could be a promotional video or article, anything like that, that is, trying to say, hey, we're doing it better. Here's a better, more kinder way. And when the reality is very, very different for those animals. And there is truly no improvement. If there is any at all, it's very little. And there's so many horrors that they face throughout their lives that whatever small improvement is not, it paints this story that everything's better. We'll get into more detail about that. So that's humane washing. The second kind of aspect or part of the Humane Hoax is greenwashing. That's another huge factor, is the environmental cover-up, where we are seeing labels like sustainable and organic and grass-fed and carbon neutral beef. There's all these new ones coming out. And we have some wonderful articles in the book, chapters in the book that really dig into this, unpack, regenerative grazing, stuff like that, all these new methods and ways of farming animals that are being promoted as being more ecological. And I'll get into that as well as we go. And the third aspect is the kind of backyard, do-it-yourself, locavore, all of that ethos of getting out of the industrial setting and into a smaller setting, whether it's your backyard or a small operation. And then there's these supposed improvements in the lives of the animals and the environmental impact. And again, I'll get into more detail about that too. But that's another aspect, is someone that wants to perhaps raise chickens for eggs, or other animals, chickens, rabbits are becoming very popular to slaughter for meat in this kind of way, in this kind of backyard butchery. So we'll talk about that as well. Oh, that's going the wrong way. Let's go this way. Wait. Yes. No. There we go. So once again, my thing is blocking. I'm going to put it over here. All right. So part one, the little Zoom thing, I am having to move it around.
Hope we could do is that Zoom button. There's three dots at the right of it. You can do hide floating mini controls, and it'll hide the bar for you.
Let's see. That would be great. I think it's fine where it is now, but just in case.
And you can bring it up by pressing escape.
Hide video panel.
On the there should be hide floating mini controls.
Hide floating. Oh, yes. Okay. Always scary to do that. Oh, no. I liked those.
Oh, you like those? So press escape then.
Escape.
To bring them back.
Oh, good. It brought it back. Okay, yeah. It's the videos. Anyway, it's okay. I'll keep moving it around. It's fine. Okay. So part one in the book, there's actually 4 parts in the book. There is humane washing, greenwashing is the second part. The third part I'm calling language and labels. And the fourth part is spiritual dimensions. So we're going to talk just a little bit about all of those sections. But the first part, humane washing, has really some wonderful chapters that I put at the very beginning, because the first 2 chapters I put at the beginning because they had these really, really heartfelt and poignant stories about animals that are actually victims of the humane hoax. The first one is called A Pig Called Silver, and it's by Ingrid Taylor. And she actually is, she was raised on a pig farm. Her family had a pig farm when she was a little girl, and she was raised on this farm. And there was one little pig that was a runt of the litter named Silver, that they named Silver because the mom took Silver into the home, into the human's home, and raised little Silver. And it's this really poignant and heart-wrenching story about what happens to Silver once she grows up, and just the realities of animal farming, no matter the label, no matter the scale. And that's what the Humane Hoax is about. So that's a really beautiful chapter, that first chapter. The Terrible Truths About Backyard Chicken Farming is the second chapter. That's with Alistair Van Cleek. And again, just fantastic stuff. Carol Adams, the legendary, wonderful, amazing Carol Adams, who has written so much wonderful, incredible works for animal rights for many, many years. She wrote, of course, The Sexual Politics of Meat back in, I believe, 1990, and so many good books since then. She has a chapter. I was just honored that she contributed a chapter to this, and it's called One Bad Day. And it is, it's that what we hear from farmers and from people that are supposedly buying from these small scale operations, where they say, oh, well, these animals, they just had one bad day. meaning the slaughter, the day they go to slaughter. And Carol does a wonderful job of unpacking first how no, there's numerous bad days, when they are debeaked, it's a bad day. When their baby is taken away from them, as in the dairy industry, and dragged away, that's a bad day. When they have their artificial insemination in turkey farming, in dairy farming, that's a bad day. There's so many days and so many aspects and things that happen to them. Dehorning, branding, castration of the pigs and of cows. So, there's there's a lot of bad days. And then to call the slaughter a bad day, it's beyond just a bad day is when you like stub your toe, or I think she used the examples of stub your toe or spill some coffee in the car. That's a bad day. The horror of having your life taken in a brutal and scary way, that's not just a bad day. That's a horrific tragedy, and to trivialize it that way is really just awful. So incredible stories. But so I'm gonna go on now. Let's see. Just some stuff around the humane hoax that I'd love to share with you. We have this kind of romanticized notion about the small farm, right? The small scale. As long as it's small, then it's okay. As long as it's not this big industrial, impersonal thing. If it's a small farm, then hey, all the horrors that the animals endure must be better, right? It must be all right now. That is not the case. And just because it's a small farm or a local farm does not mean that it's more ethical, doesn't mean that it's more environmental. And Joanne Kong is another wonderful author in the book. She has a great chapter where she gets into the language. She's in the language and labels section. And she actually wrote this fantastic anthology called Vegan Voices, Essays by Inspiring Changemakers. So that's another wonderful anthology that Joanne Kong wrote. But here's a quote from her chapter. "The scale of the operation is irrelevant. To the industry, all farmed animals are nothing more than objects, and cruel common procedures are universal to making a product profitable. On small farms, it is tragic that connections of trust are sometimes forged between the animal and the farmer, only to be horrifically betrayed when it comes time for the animal to be slaughtered." And that's why I named my first book The Ultimate Betrayal. Because even if there is this, very, very rare situation where the farmer is using a kind hand to the animal and actually being, a friend to this animal, which is it's a fantasy. It doesn't happen. But even in these rare, if there is a rare instance where this happens, they're still going to be killing this animal in just a few weeks or a few months. I mean, it's really, really brutal, and just a betrayal. Absolute betrayal of these young, healthy animals that want to live, and animals want to live. They will fight for life when they are threatened. They know what's coming, they fight for life, and it's just such a betrayal. All right, so let's see. Yeah, so it's these situations where they may know their abuser, right, and are betrayed by that abuser. And I can't imagine how frightening and confusing that would be to an animal. I'm gonna just open the chat, although I don't know if I want something in the I see there's some stuff in the chat, and I always kind of want to keep an eye out for anything, but we'll have time for Q&A at the end too. So, can people still hear me? I hope so. It says the speaker, move your microphone closer. I'll speak up. Hopefully that is not a problem anymore. It's a little while ago. but I hope you can hear me. All right. All right. So, you know what? Let me check my volume. Yeah, my volume's up. All right. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, so going on, let's see. Oh, this is a really important point that I want to throw in here. And, that is that just to finish up the small farm thing, just because it's a small farm, just because it's a family farm or has some label like family, or you've met the rancher at the farmer's market or whatever, that doesn't mean that first of all, there weren't numerous industry standard cruelties, all those cruelties that they just have to have, that they inherently have to have, that's just universal to making the product profitable, things that they can't circumvent even if they wanted to, they have to separate the babies at birth. They have to take the dairy cows' babies away because they have to sell that milk. So there's these inherent cruelties that they really just, have to do. Even if they wanted to not do that, they wouldn't be able to have a profitable product. Things like slaughtering the animals at a very young age. You can't retire the animals. It costs money. They have to have the new young animals coming in. And so, they're slaughtered at a very young age, separated, castrated, all these horrible inherent cruelties. And then on top of that, it also doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't abused. I mean, I heard horror stories when I was researching for my first book about workers that would, kick and punch and do horrible things to these animals, even with labels like small scale, even that's not a label, but even on small scale farms and labels like humane or family farm. And also another huge point is that big ag does this as well. It's not just small scale. It's not just a small farm. Big ag uses these labels as well. Big ag absolutely uses these labels. They are, constantly using this kind of marketing. They will have certified humane, all of those certifications. I use examples in the book, in my chapter, in my introduction, and in my chapter of Butterball Turkey, Tillamook Dairy, Fairlife Dairy. And these are all situations where there have been, I think most of them are situations where there have been undercover investigations, undercover investigators, these brave people that go undercover in these places with a camera, and they will take video. They'll work for a few weeks at these places and take video of what's going on, and just really, really heart-wrenching tales of what's going on, and I don't want to get too graphic. I try not to get too graphic because it can get awful. What you hear about and what you see in these videos, right? So, but suffice it to say, they are not living a happy life. They are not living in a humane way, and it's really heart-wrenching. So the big industrial players, they are using these labels as well. It is certainly not limited to small operations and small scale. So it's kind of this industry trend across the board to use this labeling and to use this language to really make people feel better about what's going on, right? Because they're learning, they're hearing about these things, they're seeing videos. And so the industry really has to try to use this stuff to appease them. All right, so let's talk about the chicken industry and how chickens are raised. I'm going to kind of get into how the humane hoax is different from, or how they're saying it's different from, but how it's really not from conventional farming. So what are we seeing here? We are seeing what should be a natural way for a chicken to come into the world, right? A mother hen, a soft, cushy nest. She's sitting on the eggs. Do you know that actually chickens and their eggs, mama hens and their eggs can actually communicate vocally. They cluck and coo to each other. The eggs can actually, the little chicks inside can cluck and coo, and they talk to one another even before they're hatched, which I think is just so amazing and endearing and very, very loving. But this is completely eradicated, completely erased, completely, not what is happening in any kind of egg farming and flesh farming, the farming of flesh, the chickens for their flesh. This does not happen. This is the reality. The chicks are born in hatcheries, industrial hatcheries and metal drawers, where they are just crowded in there, never feel the love of a mother hen, never feel a warm nest. They are immediately thrown onto conveyor belts and in machinery and tossed around by the workers. On the right here, this is sexing the babies, where they are determining by feel whether they're male or female, tossing them into the different chutes. The females, this is the egg laying strand of chickens. So for the egg layers, they have been so genetically manipulated to lay so many eggs well beyond their natural capacity. They just really, really, it taxes their body. They lay so many eggs. And the males don't grow fast enough to be profitable for meat, for their flesh. So they're a waste product of the industry. And they throw away these baby males by the billions. The baby males are tossed into the garbage alive. They're tossed into dumpsters outside of the hatcheries to suffocate on the weight of their brothers, die of dehydration, exposure, or they may be ground up alive. Some of them go down these conveyor belts into maceration machines, which are just kind of huge blenders with these metal blades that just grind them up alive to be used for products, for fertilizer, stuff like that. Just horrific, horrific stuff. And I don't want to stay on that picture for too long, but just to think about this, these are babies. These are, sweet, innocent babies that we view in our society as this image of gentleness and love. And we see them at Easter and in the springtime, on imagery on our cards and marketing and stuff like that. And to think that this is happening, that they're being killed on such a massive scale by the billions, it's just unfathomable to me. And again, this happens no matter the label. This is where the small scale, even the backyard chicken farmer is getting their chickens. They are buying their chickens from these hatcheries. So even if you're buying chicks at the feed store or on Craigslist or whatever, or at the farmer's market, you're buying your eggs at the farmer's market or at a cage-free label, all the chicks are funneled through this industry. All the chicks come from these horrible hatcheries that are killing billions of chicks. So there's no way to get away from this if you are producing eggs in some way. All right, so I used to live in Sonoma County, California. I lived there for many, many years, my whole adult life, really. And there is a lot of this small scale operations going on out there. And I now live in Oregon. I moved up to Oregon just very recently this year. But I lived in Sonoma County for many, many years. And I was really lucky that I actually decided to do on-site research, like an on-site going to these farms. I actually decided to do that. And that was like 12 years ago, about 12, 15 years ago. And I was lucky that I was able to do that at that time, because you can't do that now. You really can't do it now. I was, there's now, because of people like me that went up and started asking questions, and other people that went up and started rescuing animals, that we really can't, they're so tight with security now that you're really not able to do it anymore. But I was, and I did, and I just walked right up to these cage-free chicken farming places and, organic dairy and all of that. I would just walk right up and just kind of look around, take pictures, ask questions. And it was interesting, how different the different reactions I got. And sometimes I would have a worker or even the owner just kind of show me around, and we would have a long conversation. Or I would get, thrown out quickly. They'd get my number right away and say, get out of here. And I would just leave. But yeah, interesting stuff. But this is what I found when I went around, and unfortunately I didn't get great pictures because, again, this was 12 years ago, and the camera, I don't even know if I used a camera phone. Now I think about it, I might have just used a camera, but of course the quality was really bad. But I got some pictures. So anyway, for a chicken farm, when you walk up to a chicken farm, this is in the Sonoma County area, this is the kind of signs that you would see. You would see keep out, biosecure area, trying to keep you from coming in. And really, there was no way to know that it was a chicken farm, other than I knew. I figured it out because there was no signage or anything. But I knew what was going on. And so this is typically what you would see. Again, you're seeing those keep out signs. You see these, rows and rows of barns, the big, long, windowless barns. And what you didn't see was chickens, right? You didn't really see chickens, even though there were sometimes tens of thousands of chickens on these farms. You rarely saw a chicken. And so I would go up to these places and peer in, and I never got, unfortunately, a good picture peering in because it's so dark. It was so dark in there, and I didn't have a good quality camera. But I didn't take this picture, but this is typically what I would see. And this is a just typical cage-free egg farm, egg building. Now, how the egg industry farms birds in a commercial situation usually now is with the battery cages, right? The battery cages where they're stacked on top of each other, they're crammed into these tiny cages. It would be like living your whole life in a crowded elevator. It's really, really tight and uncomfortable. So, it's a horrible situation. And really, arguably, I would say for many years for us, it's been the kind of what we've used as like the worst of the worst. It's the worst thing, these battery cages, these poor hens are enduring in these battery cages, right? We've as an animal advocacy movement, we've really harped on this. And so the industry responded, and the industry came up with cage-free farming. Okay. So cage-free farming is our new way of farming hens for eggs. And it's really taken off. We see cage-free eggs everywhere. And I'll start by saying that, yes, absolutely, getting the birds out of the cages is a good thing. I would never say that it's not a good thing. Any slight improvement in their life, has got to be good. However, unfortunately, the reality for the birds is essentially unchanged. They're just in a big cage now with thousands of birds in these windowless warehouses. It's called a floor system operation, and it's actually the same way that we raise chickens for their flesh. This is the exact same way that we raise chickens for their flesh. And we've said that has been cruel for many, many years. So nothing has really changed there. They've just gotten the birds out of the cages and thrown them into these, windowless warehouses where they are so crowded. They're on top of each other. They don't have any personal space or room. They don't see the light of day. They aren't able to, have a moment in the sun, or do a little dust bath like they love. There's so many things that they connect with the earth with, and they peck around, and they need stimulation and a life. This is not a life for them. It's just a miserable existence. The ammonia builds up in there, the ammonia from their waste, where they can barely breathe, and they're breathing in this ammonia. It causes burning, ammonia burn in their throat, in their mouths, in their lungs. It's it's just awful. And what's frustrating, right, is that while, again, it's good that we've gotten them out of the cages, certainly, all the welfare issues for these birds seems to funnel through this one label, right? These two words, cage free, right? And now all the other issues that they face, all these things I've been talking about, from the hatchery to the horrible existence to the slaughter, are erased. That they don't exist. They're not seen. They're not known. They are just erased from the picture, and they're not acknowledged, right? And so this label is incredibly misleading. It's incredibly misleading. From the beginning of their lives to the end, there is cruelty beyond the cage. And people see this label and they think that the birds are living a stress-free, wonderful life. And that is not the truth. That is very far from the truth. And so we have to keep educating on these labels. And that's why I wrote this book, so that we could expose this hoax. So, all right, I will move on from that. But let's see here. Okay. So let's talk about dairy now, alternative dairy production, which are labels like organic, or certified humane is another one. And so there's still the same, again, just as with the chickens, just with all animal farming, there is the same inherent cruelties, again, that just they have to use these procedures to be able to make the product profitable, to have a profitable product. If they didn't use these certain inherent things, inherent procedures that are so cruel, then they wouldn't be able to make a profit. And one of those is taking the babies away at birth. Another is artificial insemination. These cows, it's of course this this common misconception that cows just give milk. Somehow cows are different from every other mammal for some reason. They just give milk. Well, that's of course not the case. Like any other mammal, the females only lactate when they are pregnant and have given birth. So they have to keep them pregnant to give birth to baby after baby after baby, way more than they would in nature. They're pregnant every year of their life. And that is very, very taxing on their bodies from the artificial insemination. Because of that intensity and because of the dirty conditions and crowded conditions, they get diseases, sicknesses that aren't treated. And of course, they go to a brutal slaughter at a very, very young age. So again, I went and looked at these dairy farms in my area. And, and this, of course, on the left here is what we want to believe is happening in alternative dairy and in humane dairy. We want to believe that the baby gets to stay with the mom and that they're out in some grass. And that is not reality. The reality is on the right here, where this little baby has been taken from her mom. And I know she's a female, because she's being put in these calf hutches. And I mean, you can see she's so frightened. She's wet with her birth fluid. I mean, she is still wet with birth fluid. She's been taken from her mom at birth. She is being put in with the other females on the other side of the dairy in these calf hutches that are kind of like dog houses, basically. So they're separated from their mom. They're separated from each other. So So when I did my investigation and went up to these organic dairy farms, it's very different than the chicken farms. It's very different because chickens are very hard to hide. Chickens are tiny, and you only have to keep them in one location and just collect the eggs, right? So or slaughter them for their flesh. So they're easy to hide. They keep them in a building until the day they go to slaughter. Cows are harder to hide. They're very big animals, and they have to move them from barn to barn, from thing to thing. So from one barn, from a holding pen to where they milk them, to different areas, right? So you see the cows. So they can't hide them. They can't just say, keep out, don't come in here. So instead, what you see all these humane labels, or these, feel good labels, right? Environmentally certified organic, everything's fine on this farm, nothing wrong, nothing to see here, nothing going on here. But then when I would walk up and get closer, here's some more of the labels and signs that I would see. You see these all up and down the roads out in West County of Sonoma County. This is often what you see first. You see these rows and rows of calf hutches, okay? And these calf hutches, every time you see one of these, you know that a baby has been taken from her mother at birth and is being chained up and, confined in these calf hutches. And it breaks my heart, because not only is it, frightening and confusing for the baby, but it's psychologically traumatizing for the mom as well, to have these babies taken away. So it's just one of the worst things. And no matter the label, anytime I saw certified humane, organic, whatever, you walk up, you see these calf hutches, so the babies have been taken. Now, one time I went to one of these dairies and they were giving a tour, right? They were giving a tour. They called it farm trails, I think. And you were able to go to the farm for one day. And this was the scene that they showed us actually on a dairy, was this little calf, and she had some straw, and this was set inside the barn, but there was very little room for any others. So that they kind of had just set this up for us, because all the others were outside. So she had some shade. It was a very hot summer day. And, but it was interesting because people started fawning over her and just, oh, isn't she so sweet? And she would suckle our hands and our fingers, because she was so wanting to suckle her mother's udder. But it just broke my heart that two things. One, that she had that tag in her ear, that awful tag that shows that, they are commodified, that these animals are just objects. They're a number, not a name, not a someone, but a something. And that she was separated from her mom and from other calves and from being outside and being able to frolic and play. I mean, they were showing, oh, look, she's got straw and she's so healthy and taken care of. But the reality is that no, she's alone, she's sad, she's frightened without her mom. You have to know what's going on, to be able to see past what they're showing you. Right. All right. So this is some of the other pictures that I took just from my investigations. These were ones when I just walked up and it wasn't what they showed me, right? It wasn't a tour, but it was just me going to see what was going on. And I would see animals in muck up to their knees in manure. There were lots of other pictures that didn't come out as well, unfortunately. But this one on the right, I just want to point this out, that this little calf there is likely a male, because he was not taken over to where the females are with the hutches, right, to be raised for dairy. They're of course put in those calf hutches to be bottle fed. They never drink their mom's milk. They're bottle fed, the females, until they're old enough to be artificially inseminated for the first time. But this, I believe, to be a little male, because he was curled up all alone. They had separated him from his mom and just kind of thrown him out in this paddock, and he was probably awaiting a transport truck that would take him to slaughter, either veal or beef to be slaughtered. So, the dairy industry, once again, the males are a byproduct, the males are unneeded, and they just, are thrown away, go to slaughter, just like the males in the chicken industry. Oh, this mama cow, bless her heart, she was that, it's hard to tell within this picture, but that back left leg in the back there with all the mud on it was so swollen. It was swollen like 2 or 3 times her other feet. And she was limping terribly on it, just really limping. She was in a lot of pain, and she'd take like 2 steps and then stop, and then take 2 steps and stop. I wished I could have taken video. Again, it was, 15 years ago, so I didn't have good video. But this, you go out, you still see this. Unfortunately, it's harder to get these images now. We need the undercover investigators, but of course they find all this stuff. Let's see. All right. So I want to talk about this romanticized notion of getting the animals out to pasture, right? There's this kind of just romance and nostalgia and good feelings around this notion of getting the animals out in the paddock, in the pasture. As long as we get them out of the confinement barns, then all the issues are solved, right? All the problems will be solved. And this has really become kind of a narrative, I think, that the industry is spinning, and it's not the case. These animals are not wild animals. They are domesticated animals. They need our care. We have manipulated them so much that we now have to really be involved in their welfare and their care for them to be comfortable. They're not wild animals. You can't just throw them out into a field and, think everything's going to be fine. There are many issues that they can face. Sometimes they can suffer even worse when they're out on pasture. So putting animals out to pasture, there's a lot, it's very complicated. It's very complex. And there was this really wonderful study. It was called The Animal Welfare and Production Challenges Associated with Pastured Pig Systems. And it really, really underscored the just myriad of problems that face pastured animals and free-ranging animals. Right. It was a meta-analysis. It looked at numerous different studies from 2000 to 2020. So 20 years of peer-reviewed studies and other accounts. And it found that pigs had, that often, in these pastured situations, pigs have exposure to extreme temperatures, heat stress. They're not able to get adequate shade. The lighter colored pigs, the little pink pigs, could suffer from sunburn, blistering. And then in the winter, in extreme cold, they'd sometimes have frostbite. They'd get hypothermia, pneumonia. They were more vulnerable to predators being out there. They had more contact with wildlife, so there were more pathogens, parasites, viruses, just really awful stuff, right? And there was more complexity in monitoring all the animals. When they're indoors, it's much easier to monitor them and their illnesses and sicknesses and what medications they may need. So much harder when they're out on pasture. So it really went into a lot. And actually, the study is cited and talked about in the first chapter of the book, The Humane Hoax. In that chapter, I talked about a pig called Silver. Ingrid Taylor goes into great detail about this a really fascinating study. So it's in the book. And, and that paper didn't even go into like transportation, slaughter. So, there's so much that they face. And so just getting the animals out to pasture is, it doesn't make everything, all humane and okay. And then, of course, environmentally, it can be horrible too. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. Yeah. So, okay. So we are going to move on actually to the greenwashing section, but I just to wrap up the humane washing, I really encourage you to not disconnect from the emotional reality of the violence that is inherent in animal farming, and killing an animal for her flesh, for her eggs, because in eggs and dairy, they go to slaughter at a very young age as well. And again, that's that inherent cruelty part that they just can't circumvent because they need the product to be profitable. So I just encourage you to remember that no matter how the animal was raised, no matter what the label is, animal farming can never be consistent with being compassionate or kind or ethical. All right, so we'll move on to greenwashing. I have no idea how long I have, but I'll just keep going here. So the second part, greenwashing. Okay, that's part 2 in the book, and I have several wonderful chapters. Let's see, greenwashing, a bloody business. The planet can't survive sustainable animal agriculture. That is Lorelei Poslenik. She's a wonderful activist, and Nicholas Carter actually was just on my podcast. I'm going to give a plug at the end about my podcast, Hope for the Animals podcast, but the episode that I have out now on my podcast is with Nicholas Carter, and we really unpack his wonderful chapter here called Grazing versus the Planet, a failed attempt to greenwash animal farming. And we really dig into regenerative animal ag and grass-fed and stuff like that. So I'm going to talk a bit about it here as well. Let's see. So there's just some wonderful chapters. A fox guarding the hen house. Can animal agriculture reform itself? So that's a great chapter title. All right. So greenwashing. Let's dig in. So, just having the billions of farmed animals alive, no matter how they're raised, right? And maybe I don't want to look at this meat. Let's go back to this one while we're talking about the general, and then we'll get into I'm going to start with the local label, but just having all these animals alive, no matter how they're raised, right? It wastes tons of resources, water, causes pollution. These things really can't change. Again, these are the inherent things, right? Like there's inherent cruelties. These are the inherent impacts. How much water you use. It's really hard to change that. The resources involved, these things really can't change. And it's causing so much destruction, climate disruption, deforestation, wasting water, water pollution, biodiversity loss, so much impact of animal agriculture. And this is really coming to light now, right? I mean, I think that a lot of people are going vegan and learning and feeling out veganism, coming into veganism through the environmental piece, which is just incredible. I'm so glad for that. We need to move quickly because our time is running out on this planet. So that's really, really good. It's a good sign that people are starting to wake up, make this connection, realize that they have so much power on their plate to make change and to reduce their personal carbon footprint, right? But just as with humane washing, the industry is responding, right? And they're kind of like, well, here, we're working on it. Let me help you with that. Let me tell you what to do. We have the solution. Just buy local or organic or free range and all these other labels, right? Sustainable. We're seeing all kinds of labels now. All right, so let's get into it. Now we'll look at this yucky meat. So local. So local, we see this label everywhere, right? We're seeing this just, it's it's amazing how often I see it and how little is defined, right? How little the definition gets out. What does it mean? How far? What is local? Is it, 50 feet? Is it 500, miles? What's local? And really, it's the product or the store that's defining it. So we don't really have a set definition. It's not a regulated label. So you can say what you want or make it what you want. But just looking at food miles, right? Okay. If you look at a food's carbon footprint, food's carbon footprint, transportation or how far the food traveled is only 11% of the equation. Okay, just 11%. That's how much impact the food miles have. The production phase, how resource intensive the production was of that product, is 83% of the greenhouse gas equation. Okay, so what we have to really look at is the resources and the production, and animal products are heavy on the production phase, right? When they do these life cycle assessment calculations where they, look at the impact of a food from the birth, well, with an animal, it would be like the birth to slaughter. With a plant food, it's seed to plate. And they are making these comparisons again and again and again. Animal products are more impactful, use more energy, have more resources, more water, more this, more that, everything, more greenhouse gas. And no matter the label, it doesn't matter what the label is. When the comparison is between an animal product and a plant food, the animal product is always more impactful. I'll just wrap up the local section by saying this. A study in the Journal of Environmental Science and Technology found that switching just 2 meals a week from meat and dairy to a vegetable-based diet achieves more greenhouse gas reduction than buying all locally sourced food. Wow. That's just 2 meals a day. And, still it's better. Local means very little. It means very, very little. So don't get, distracted by the local label. Really going vegan is best. Eating low on the eating plant foods. All right, let's look at organic. So organic. Now, I'll start by saying something about organic in that this is one of the labels that does have regulation. Of all the labels we're talking about, this is the one that really has the most, I would say, a good amount of regulation. They've got on-site inspection. They've got, it takes some work and some money and some effort to get an organic certification. So there is some oversight there. However, really the only difference, the only reason that you get the organic certification or what they're looking for is that the grain fed to the animals or the feed fed to the animals is organic and the animals are essentially drug-free. Okay, that's basically it. All the other factors, both environmentally and ethically, are unchanged. So yeah. But in looking environmentally, there's some regulation. I'll just say quickly, there's some regulation on species by species as far as if they have access to the outside, but it's very industry friendly. Like I said, cows generally have access to the outside. So the organic standard is that cows have to have access to the outside. However, chickens do not. And that's because industry standard is that chickens are usually kept inside. So these labels can be very industry friendly. So anyway, let's look at this chart. Okay, so we've got 3 diets here: veganism, vegetarian, and a diet that includes meat, dairy, and eggs. And going across, we've got a light green line, which is organic farming, and a dark green line, which is conventional farming. Okay, and of course, how far the line goes across is how much impact there is on the planet and on greenhouse gases. This is specific to greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so look down at the very bottom at that dark green line going across the bottom. That is the standard American diet. That is the SAD diet that everyone is eating, most everyone. And that includes all the animal products and is not organic. So let's say that someone says, I really want to eat more eco-friendly. I really want to, be more conscious around what I'm eating environmentally. I'm going to eat only organic milk and organic dairy or organic meat, organic eggs, right? I'm going to go all organic with my animal products. Okay, so you reduce your impact a bit. You go to that next light green line just above that one, and you've reduced your impact by 8%. Okay, that's something. But let's say that same person says, I really want to eat more eco. I want to reduce my impact through my diet. I'm going to go vegan. And now we're not even talking about organic, just eating vegan. Okay, now you've reduced your impact. You go up to that top dark green line, and you have reduced your impact by 87%. Wow, right? Okay, that's way better. And you can take it all the way and do organic vegan, and you've reduced your impact by 92%. That's that tiny little light green line at the top. So once again, my message is that, organic, local, these kinds of things with animal products, it may be a little better, it may not be. But truly the impact where you're going to make some big changes, where you're really going to affect your impact on the climate in your purchases, is by choosing vegan products and vegan living and vegan and vegetables, eating vegan. All right. You don't have to use vegan products. You don't have to buy the vegan meats or anything like that. Not necessary at all. Fine if you want to use that for transition or every now and again, but not necessary. But eating vegan, whole food, plant-based is, of course, the best. Okay, moving on. So free range. So people often think that this is a better solution environmentally, a better label environmentally. But the reason I use this picture, going back to the same picture of the cage-free operation, is because this could be a free-range operation. All they would have to do is open the doors to a little, outdoor patio. Maybe it's a concrete patio, maybe it's a mud patio. I went and saw, when I was going and looking at these places, I saw free-range facilities that had thousands of birds inside a building, and then they had an open door to this little mud hole. It was like a patio with mud. And it was so unappealing that no bird seemed to even want to go out there, right? And they called that free range. Okay. Doesn't matter how long they have that open for there's no regulation on how long they have access to the outside, what that outside access looks like, what the size of that nothing. It's whatever the farmer wants to say. And these labels are awarded no matter what. Basically, they just will, they'll fill out a form for the FDA or the USDA, whoever is awarding these labels, and they're awarded the label. Nobody comes out to look. Nobody asks any questions. It's, nobody is rejected. So they can get whatever label they want. Okay. So, but whenever there's a transition to a truly free range farm, let me just see what my next one's grass fed. So sometimes I put a picture of little piggies, but I don't have it here. So whenever there's a transition though, to like pasture raised or a kind of a truly free range farm. And there is this farming happening with pigs. And we talked about that, pasturing pigs, and with chickens as well. So now if this farmer, let's say that this farmer that has this building wants to actually have his chickens outside in a pasture situation where they actually do have, some space to roam. Okay. So what he would have to do is this is probably maybe on a quarter of an acre of land, right? Half an acre at most. He would have to have acres and acres and acres more space to accommodate all these birds. So what generally happens is that they have a much smaller number of birds. So you're feeding way less people for lots more acres of space. And to do this, to be able to do this, they have to, they're going to have to clear wetlands and prairies and deforest areas to be able to accommodate all these local free range, situations for the egg-laying hens and for pigs and whatever. So, I mean, it's actually been estimated that we would need closer to 5 planet Earths if we free ranged all the animals that we have in confinement right now. It just can't be done. It cannot be done. Free range, and I've said this before, free ranging animals for food can never be more than a specialty market for a few elite buyers. That's all it can be. We can't scale this up. There's just no way to scale it up, right? There's an interesting study, but I'm gonna actually, I think it's in the book, so you got to read the book for the interesting study I was going to talk about. Okay, so let's move on to grass-fed. All right, so grass-fed beef. Grass-fed beef can produce up to 50 to 60% more greenhouse gas emissions than commercial beef, conventional beef. It should really be conventional, I would say, because grass-fed is kind of commercial. Anyway, more water is wasted as well. So conventional cows are slaughtered at about a year old, right? That's give or take a few months, about a year old. But grass-fed cows, because they're not getting fattened up quickly with grain, with feed, it can take them 18 to 24 months longer to get up to market weight. So that's just so much more time that they are drinking the water and burping and emitting methane and drinking the clean water, polluting the water. There's all these studies coming out, and it's so frustrating because why would someone buy this product, right? They think it's more environmental. I mean, that's really the main reason. I think they may think it's better for the animals as well, but I'd say they think it's more environmental, right? That's why they're reaching for grass-fed whatever. Well, there's all these studies now coming out from Oxford, Harvard, Washington State University that have compared like feedlot cows, conventional cow rearing to grass-fed. And they keep finding again and again that grass-fed requires more land, more water, more fossil fuels, and it's just so, and produces more greenhouse gases. And it's just like it's like a facepalm moment. It's like, well, why, why are we even doing this then? It's a situation where it's not only neutral, it's worse. And like I said in the very beginning, I thought that I was going to be going into all this research saying things like, well, grass-fed's better, but going vegan's best. No, here's one of those situations where, no, it's not better. It's actually worse. So this is the moment where there are some out there that would say, wait. You can't just throw the cows out into the pasture and think everything's going to be okay. There are methods. There are farming methods that you have to adhere to make it work. And that's where we get into regenerative grazing. Okay, I forgot I had this slide. This is an example of some grass-fed dairy that I found, took a picture of, and just thought it was interesting that they had her name here, Buttercup, and Buttercup here is long slaughtered, long gone. By the time this milk, and it's just very interesting, the marketing, right? How they're trying to tell a story that doesn't exist, that isn't real. So regenerative grazing. Okay. So regenerative grazing, this is actually nothing new, even though we're just kind of now hearing about it. This has been called lots of different things over the years: holistic management, rotational grazing, short duration grazing. It's basically, but now the industry has kind of landed on the word regenerative and kind of using now the word regenerative for this grazing method. Basically, it's the same kind of thing as with free range. You have to use a much smaller number of animals in a much larger area of space, and they fence these paddocks. So there's all kinds of fencing, lots of fencing with these paddocks, and they move a small herd of cows from paddock to paddock so that they don't overgraze one area. Okay, that's the idea of regenerative grazing. Now, there is a lot to it. It is very complicated, but just to kind of an overview is that there really isn't any peer-reviewed research that shows that this is better. And in fact, even the industry's research, when a farm will hire a researcher to look into it, it's still not good, right? So interestingly, it's a nice story to tell, but the science doesn't hold water, right? And it's something that that everyone wants to believe is true. I think that want to believe that there's a way they can have their beef and eat it too, or have their cake and eat it too, and have their beef and eat it too. But there's been a lot of study and research around this, and it's really no better. It's too complicated to really get into in this short a period of time or in this moment. But again, I'll give a plug for my podcast. I think I did earlier, but I'll do it again. Hope for the Animals podcast, the episode that is out now. Nicholas Carter, one of the authors from our greenwashing section, we break it down. He breaks it down, the regenerative animal ag, and really how this is, again, this narrative of some improvement that is not going to save the world. And it's really frustrating. The farm bill is coming up, and there's going to be this push to allocate money to regenerative grazing in the farm bill, and we've got to fight that. I really am grateful for the activists out there that are working on that issue, for the farm bill to not have this regenerative grazing aspect, be the thing that we see as the solution, because it really is not. Okay, so what is a solution? What can we do? Rewilding, regrowing the land. Turns out that there actually is something that is wonderful for the topsoil, for water quality, for greenhouse gas emissions, for sequestering carbon, right? It's leaving it alone. Leave the planet alone. Nothing sequesters carbon better than wild spaces, green spaces. So this is really what we need to focus on. We've got to be rewilding, regrowing, regreening. And the best way to do this is to stop farming animals, because they take up so much land, so much space. To farm animals takes up so much of the Earth's surface. And if we move to a plant-based diet that reduces and reduces and reduces the amount of land that we need, a vegan diet requires so little land comparatively. So we would have that, be able to rewild all of that space. It's so critical now, and it's so easy. I don't like this analogy. I got to think of a better one, but it feels so much like a silver bullet solution. Like it's just like it's easy, but yet, of course, because of things and how things are, there's so much complication. But anyway. It feels exciting to me, because of course we think we're going to have all these technical solutions and technology to save us, and I'm sure we're going to need all that too. But here is a beautiful, natural, nature-based solution to the climate crisis, right? Rewilding. So cool. All right. So third section, I'm going to move along here to part 3 of the book, which is language and labels. And this section is really fascinating it has some wonderful wonderful chapters. We talk about media and the journalism, and how they really prop up the humane hoax, how media is often looking for that feel-good story, so they will latch on to these kinds of new farming methods, and they'll just really give voice to this kind of farming without any pushback from any kind of other side. So that's a really fascinating chapter called Humane Myths and Media. There's just some wonderful, wonderful chapters in that section of language and labels. All right, so, and again, I just put here, there are inherent cruelties in all animal farming that cannot be avoided and are not diminished by a reassuring label. So, and I have this in my, I think it's in my chapter or in the introduction, I can't remember, but it's really interesting that there was this survey by the Sentience Institute that found that 58% of people think that farmed animals are treated well, and 75 believe that the products that they purchase come from animals that are treated humanely. And I strongly believe that this is because of these alternative labels and humane labeling, right? It's just exacerbating this effect that people think that things are improving. And it's appeasing consumers into this false sense that the industry is moving, towards better conditions for animals, when in reality, it's getting worse. It's getting worse for these animals. So it's certainly not the case that things are getting better, but they see these labels, they assume that this is a trend throughout the industry, no matter what they're buying personally, right? So the Sentience Institute also said, this suggests a psychological refuge effect where people justify their animal product consumption by incorrectly assuming they are eating ethically produced food. So, yeah. But language is so important, I think. Language is a huge part of all this, and it's really important. It's just so critical. We compartmentalize animals right into categories like pet and wild animal and food animal, and that kind of speciesist language. Speciesism meaning that this human superiority complex that we have over animals. That language really defines how we feel about these different animals. And then digging into the food animal piece, really the language is so important and key, and how we use how they're using these labels tells such a story. 2 words like cage free can tell this huge story in people's minds, right? That is not reality. But this is an interesting quote from another chapter in the book. Devata Nair has a wonderful chapter in this section, in the language and labels section in the book. And her chapter is called Corrupting the Language of Animal Welfare. And she wrote, it is also the crafty use of language in the stories we tell ourselves, that allow us to fawn over the animals at a zoo and still be able to consume other animals a few moments later for lunch without raising too many existential qualms. So, yeah, right? It's that language and labeling, separating the animal from that food, separating the food from the individual. It's really, really fascinating. So, yeah, what's going on with these labels? There's just so many that what is the story that's being told, right? So I recently saw this, it was actually a few years now, but I think it's still out, this grass-fed milk chocolate bar. And, I took a picture and just started really thinking about this. And I was like, what does the manufacturer want me to believe about this, right? What do they want me to know about this product from these 2 words, grass-fed, right? And, do they want me to think that the cows are happy? Do they want me to think that it's more environmental? a better environmental product? Is the product healthier, right? I think the answer to all these questions is implied, right? They want you to think all of that. They want you to believe a story that is untrue. And it's what does the label really mean, right? It means that the cow was fed grass at some point in their life. That's all. That's all. That's all the label means. All these other things that we tell ourselves, all this other story that comes up, that's marketing. And it's not reality. So, there's all these assumptions and suggestions from just one or two words, right? And how easily influenced we are as consumers because we want to believe it. We want to believe we don't want to believe we're causing harm, right? We want to believe that we're doing the right thing, that we're choosing the right products, that we're not harming animals. So they're feeding into that. It's very manipulative. They're feeding into that desire for consumers to do the right thing. It's very, very frustrating. And again, it's why I wrote this book, why I edited this book, so that the reality of these labels can come out. Another one that I want to point out is responsibly raised. And this one just takes it to a whole nother awful level, saying responsibly raised and unconditionally loved. Okay. Wow. So unresponsibly raised, first of all, we're seeing this now at Whole Foods. Chipotle is using this one. It's just, it kind of cracks me up because what does this mean? It's sufficiently vague that it could mean anything, they could be talking about ethical, they could be talking about environmental, we don't know. We have no idea. And then that unconditionally loved, ooh, so awful. So, okay, so what are we looking at here? We're looking at a burrito, right? We're looking at dead flesh in a burrito. But of course, what the intention, or I think what they're trying to say, is that the animal that it came from was unconditionally loved. But to say that an animal that is now dead and cut up in a burrito was unconditionally loved, how on earth can you say that? Where is the unconditional love in brutally slaughtering a young, healthy animal? Wow. This stuff is really psychologically disturbing, I think, and just very awful, terrible. And just to think that these animals, saying these animals were loved when they are still, they're separating families, they're using painful body mutilations like dehorning and castration and debeaking, and they're still going to slaughter at a very young age. I mean, that to say that someone that goes through that is loved, wow, horrible. So yeah, it's awful. So another one of the chapters in this section from Joanne Kong, this is a great quote from her book, or her chapter in the book: redefining terms to imply that the humane treatment of animals is possible within a framework of animal agriculture known as humane washing has been instrumental in providing the discourse necessary for the continued exploitation and abuse of animals. So that's what's going on here, is basically these labels are making it so they can continue their horrible practices and this terrible, unsustainable industry. All right. So moving on to the spiritual dimensions, I'm going to wrap up here pretty soon, and we will maybe be able to take some questions, but I think I'm running out of time possibly. But the spiritual dimensions in the book, this is just a small section that I really wanted to have in there for some really interesting chapters. One is called Honor Killing, Spiritual Bypass, and the False Faith in Do-It-Yourself Slaughter. This one was written by my husband, Dr. Hope Bohanec. He is a Dharma professor of Dharma studies. And this is really fascinating. He talks about spiritual bypass in DIY slaughter, where in do-it-yourself backyard slaughter, they're using these kind of flowery language and spiritual language to really kind of, put a nice package around what's happening and the reality of the violence of what's happening when you are killing an animal. Saying things like that we're connecting with the animal and we're sending the animal's spirit to the other side, whatever, all this stuff that they say. It's a fascinating read. I put on here this image of a slaughterhouse. This is a slaughterhouse in Petaluma, California, that got this fresh new white paint job, and they put on the side of the building "Mindful Meats." And in my chapter, I go off on this and how awful it is that they would use this term mindful, from the mindfulness movement that is, drawn from Buddhist and Hindu cultures around meditation and being mindful of your actions, being mindful of what you're doing in the moment. It relates to karma and dharma and all kinds of stuff I get into in the chapter. And it's just to put that on the side of a slaughterhouse. It is, wow. It's mind blowing and awful. And as a spiritual person, it's offensive to me. Yeah. So just kind of wrapping up, I will say that I think that the Humane Hoax is actually a positive progression. And even though I've been talking all this time about how horrible it is, I also believe that there is hope within it because, why are people seeking out these labels? Because they care. They care about animals. They want to do the right thing. They don't want to be part of harming animals. That's why these labels sell, right? So I think that's hopeful. And I think that there will be a logical progression to eventually realizing that if you truly want to be humane, you can't kill an animal. You can't kill these animals and think that that's humane. It's the logical progression of treating them kindly, giving them space, whatever it is that people want. The logical progression is that you cannot kill them, and that will, the industry can't survive, obviously. So I think we'll get there. I really do. I have faith and hope that people will that we will get there. But we can't trust the producers and the farmers and the manufacturers to reform their own business any more than we could trust the fossil fuel industry to reform their own business. So self-regulation doesn't work. We've got to make bold changes. So, all right, I'm seeing our host coming in. I'll flip through the last here really quick.
Take your time.
Yeah, the only truly humane choice is vegan. So I'd love to invite you to our upcoming conference, the Humane Hoax Project, of which this book is affiliated. We're having our Humane Hoax online conference on Saturday, May 20th. Would love you to join us. If you just go to humanehoax.org, you can learn more about it and register. We're going to dig in deeper to this book and have some of the authors unpack their chapters. I also want to give a plug to my podcast, the Hope for the Animals podcast. Right now I'm doing a book series. So we're looking at the book for about 4 episodes, doing kind of a book club style dig into the book, as well as having some of the chapter authors as guests. So please check out the Hope for the Animals podcast. You can get it wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can go just to our website and listen, hopefortheanimals.org. And finally, I will wrap up with this quote from my book. I really encourage you to get the book if you can from the publisher Lantern or from Amazon or wherever you buy your books. And I'll wrap up with this quote: "We must not let the deception of new marketing eclipse the fundamental cruelty of animal agriculture." And I'll wrap it up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope, for that very informative presentation. I think a lot of people aren't really aware of what's going on with regard to that. So now we're going to begin our live Q&A, and you've shown where they can get your book and how to contact you. So that's very helpful to the audience. I'll be asking some questions, and I will be also opening up to the audience to ask questions. And we don't, if you're not sure how so basically real quickly, just want to go over a couple of things. We don't take questions directly from the chat. Instead, we ask everyone to virtually raise their hand. If you're not sure how to do this, what you want to do is click on the reactions button on the bottom right, second from the right button on the in Zoom. And once you click on that, you're going to select the raise hand function in the pop-up menu. When I call your name, I will unmute you and prompt you to state where you are from and to ask your questions. We ask that everyone keep their questions brief and on topic. So with that said, let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and start asking a question here. So, yeah, you went over how there is a lot of, washing of the truth. Are cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, hens, any of these animals treated any better at all since when this kind of awareness of how animals are being treated started?
Well, what I found when I was doing my research on this, and I was going to conventional farms, just your regular, no label, whatever, general label farm. And I also went to, all these labeled farms, the certified humane and cage free and organic dairy, all of that. And what I found really was that it varied from farm to farm. I mean, there wasn't this standard across the board. This is how animals are treated in cage free, and this is how animals are treated in conventional. It really wasn't that way. It was kind of from farm to farm. I saw situations where animals were treated better, I felt from my observation, on conventional farms than on like a cage free farm, for instance. So it really depends. I mean, it's hard to say. But as far as the industry standard and what is happening to the animals from an industry standard, little has changed since the 70s, since the 80s. Very little has changed. In fact, the only thing that's really changed is they've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and now they're just mega dairies and mega farms. So there's so many more animals, so much more confinement and congestion. So, is it better? No. Across the board? No. I would say not.
All right, thank you. If people eat, so what is the impact on, of leather? People who, are vegan, when people think of vegan, they tend to think of food, as opposed to, the people who aren't vegan think of food as opposed to other aspects of animals. Is leather, a byproduct of these animals? Is it a separate industry that has their own animals that are slaughtered specifically for the leather, as opposed to just meat animals that they're using all the parts?
Yeah, no, actually they get leather. There's no separate leather industry. The leather is coming from the beef cows, the dairy cows. But it's not necessarily just a byproduct. A lot of people think, oh, it's just a byproduct of the industry. No, they make a lot of money on leather, and leather is a huge, huge industry, of course. And actually, environmentally, leather is very bad. People don't realize this, but the tanneries, when they are processing the leather, there's a lot of chemicals that go into the processing. There's a lot of wastewater pollution that comes out of the plants. And in fact, neighborhoods around tanneries will often have higher rates of problems, with their water, with the air, with asthma and breathing problems. It's very pollutive, the leather industry. So yeah, there's a lot going on there, and it's certainly something to avoid.
Thank you. So is this idea of lab grown meat a real solution for, assuming that it comes to fruition, for stopping the mistreatment of animals and the impact on the environment?
That's a big one. That's a big, big topic and messy topic to unpack. I don't know that I'm really going to make a comment, honestly. I'm still on the fence, honestly, about that one. There are people in the movement, in the animal advocacy movement, that are on both sides of this issue, that feel that it's a good thing and a good tool in our toolbox, and there's others that feel that this could be a detrimental bad thing. So I'm still on the fence there. I'm going to just leave it at that. Is some wonderful resources online to learn more about it, but it's not an issue I like to tackle, honestly.
Okay. Is it a realistic goal to get the whole world to stop eating animal products, including fish, milk, eggs? And should this be the ultimate goal?
Should this be the ultimate goal? Yes. I would say absolutely yes. To have a truly compassionate world where these animals are free of suffering, where there is, a kind, compassionate world where animals get to live their own lives. Absolutely, yes. Fish as well. I feel that we need to come to a place where we see animals for their own inherent worth, where they live free of human imposed exploitation and suffering. That should be the goal. Absolutely. Is it a realistic goal? Well, I hope so. I hope so, and I think so. I mean, I often say that I very much believe that our inherent nature as humans is compassion, and is compassionate. And when we're driving by an animal that has been killed on the side of the road, like roadkill, we don't think about lunch or dinner as we're not salivating for that animal like a carnivore would. We are like, oh, we have a reaction of, oh, that's too bad. That is our compassionate nature. When we see ducks trying to get across the road, everyone will stop their cars and try and help the mama ducks across the road, but then they go and have duck at the Chinese restaurant for dinner. So there's a disconnect there going on. But I think that once we start making those connections, seeing animals for the individuals that they are, for their wonderful personalities, their joyful lives, yes, I do believe that we will come to a place. I mean, maybe my head's in the clouds, but you have to visualize where we're going, right? You have to, if you want to create a different world, you have to see it. You have to be able to believe that it can happen and see it. And so I do see that. I see a world free of suffering for animals.
Thank you. Are there any countries or anywhere in the world that is moving in the right direction, with some sort of speed about eating, going from eating lots of animals and wearing lots of animals to eating less animals, and because they're inspired by this type of thinking?
Yeah, it's happening worldwide, actually. We're seeing movement in many, many countries. The Asian countries, China, it's amazing how much progress they're making in animal advocacy, in alternative proteins, all of that. The European countries, always the amount of vegan restaurants now in some of these more major cities, like Berlin and Paris. It's just amazing the amount of vegan options. So it's really a worldwide movement now, and we're seeing movement everywhere, which is very, very hopeful.
And are the governments actually bringing this about at all in any of these areas, or is it a bottom up sort of movement?
Bottom up, certainly, but there is some movement. There's these interesting laws that are being passed around sentience and animals, like recognizing the sentience of animals by large governmental bodies in South American countries and in European countries. It's kind of fascinating that there's these laws, but then the practices aren't following, with that, but I think that they will. So where, there's these wonderful laws being passed, acknowledging that animals are sentient beings, should be treated humanely, and recognizing that as government bodies. But then, of course, industry, there's so much suffering that goes on, but it's changing. It is changing. I believe very much that we're seeing that recognition of animals as sentient individuals that should not be commodified and killed.
How do you respond to people who argue that it's natural for humans to consume meat? You've got the paleo people who say that we've been doing this and this is sort of our natural way of eating, and that is part of our natural evolutionary history. How do you do so persuasively to those people?
Yeah, and just to note that I see Sylvia's raised her hands. We do have a question.
Yes.
So yeah, the natural. Well, this really is. It's called the naturalistic fallacy, is what this is called. I mean, to assume that something, just because something is natural, that it's healthy or right or whatever, it's that is not necessarily the case. Arsenic will kill you. It's natural. So that's not a great argument. We now live very, what could be argued as unnatural lives in our homes, in our, running water and all of that, but certainly not unhealthy. It's been very healthy for us to preserve our longevity in life, to live the lives we do now in certain ways. So anyway, it's just not a good argument. I would think the natural thing, like I was saying, would be to see an animal that is, wounded, and want to go and kill that animal and eat that animal raw, right? That would be natural. That would be the natural carnivore way of eating. Is anyone going to do that? I mean, people can barely, fathom having to butcher their own animals. So I think really our natural state is eating plants. I think that's what's natural. What is enjoyable and mouth watering when you go to a strawberry patch and pick a strawberry, right? Or an apple off a tree. That seems much more natural to me than attempting to kill, grab, hunt, crab, kill an animal and eat it raw, right? So let's look at what's really natural.
Okay, and now we'll go to Sylvia. Sylvia, please state where you're from and ask your question.
Hi, I'm from Arizona, and I was just, you said that in China they're making huge changes, and there's a lot of, plant-based meats and things that they're coming up with. But I'm wondering, why are they building, like they built that floor pig farm that is just like floor upon floor upon floor of it just breaks my heart to hear that, and that doesn't sound like they're advancing in the movement.
Right. I hear that. I mean, it's kind of like there's good news and bad news, there's both. It's kind of both happening at the same time, and they're kind of vying for the future, right? And it's true that they just built a new mega pork farm industry, which is very unfortunate. So that is still going on, absolutely. But the side that I'm talking about is that where there was maybe, I think, one office of PETA, 20, 30 years ago in China, now there are activists, not only from, Western animal advocacy organizations, but activists themselves in the country that are doing the work, that are really, that are out there, doing the outreach, exposing the issues, doing wonderful work in media. So the message is getting out in the culture, and people are choosing plant-based foods, just as everywhere. That is raising as well. That is rising as well. Is a Western-centered diet around meat also rising? Yes. So it's, there's both going on. And like I said, they're kind of vying for the future. And I'm hoping very much, I have the hope that we will take that over. We will win that battle. That they will eventually see, as we all need to see, that if we want to move into a healthy future, if we want a healthy future for our children, for this planet, meat eating is unsustainable. It is detrimental to the environment, to climate disruption, and we've got to move to a plant-based diet.
Thank you. So going back to communicating to people who are outside of the vegan movement. How do you respond to the argument that factory farming is necessary to meet global food demands? You mentioned in your presentation that it's more environmental as far as the amount of inputs that are required than these other ways of farming that seems nicer. So how do you respond? How do you respond to somebody who would bring that up?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of industry rhetoric, but interestingly, even the industry is acknowledging that they're not sustainable, and that's why they're coming out with all these new farming methods. That's why they're transitioning to regenerative and grass-fed and all these things, is that they're acknowledging that it's not sustainable, that it's not good for the planet, in a way. That's their acknowledgement, and trying to do it better or have better methods, right? But globally, we just can't do this. Most all of the land that is usable land that is going to animal agriculture across the world. It is just unsustainable. It is causing climate disruption. So, and a lot of people will say, well, you have to have animal products for plant farming, right? That you have to have the animal inputs, the animal manure and all of that. And actually what goes into animal farming and even organic farming is, a great deal of blood meal and bone meal and feather meal and fish meal and all this disgusting slaughterhouse byproduct. It's unnecessary. We don't need to be using that. And it's not really healthy or good to be using that as our method of farming. Really, the best is veganic farming. Veganic farming is a fantastic solution. It is organic, vegan farming. So all the inputs are vegan, right? There's none of those animal inputs, not even animal manure. They use plant materials for building the topsoil and for the nitrogenization and all of that, right? So veganic farming is a really fantastic solution. It is scalable. You can certainly scale it up to feed the world. And it's really what we need to be looking into is veganic farming, because that's going to be the game changer. That's going to be what's really going to help us a great deal in the long run.
And in order to do veganic farming, are there any chemical inputs that we need to be careful of, or can we do it without chemicals?
The reason it's called veganic is the organic part. It is organic. It's the same organic standards, whatever those organic standards are, plus being vegan. That's what veganic is. So no, I mean, of course, organic farming is not pure. There is certainly some chemicals and pesticides and such that are more mild that can go into organic farming. So it's not completely free of chemicals, but certainly better than and moving in the right direction.
And where is the veganic farming taking place? Is it just kind of random people doing veganic farming? Are there countries that are getting into it, or
I wish I knew more. I really don't know. I wish there was some in the areas that I've been living in, and I'm not familiar with any, but I do know that there is a wonderful book out by a farmer that is from my same publisher. He just released the book at the same time as mine. So if you go to Lantern Publishing, to their page, his name is Jimmy, and I don't remember his last name, unfortunately. It starts with a V, and he's a veganic farmer that wrote a book about veganic farming. And so there'd probably be answers to those questions in that book, or you can get in touch with him. I would love to have him as a podcast guest on my podcast, Hope for the Animals podcast, because I think that it's just a fascinating thing. And I'd love to know where it's happening as well, because I want to support it. I want to buy veganic food. We need to know where these farms are.
And what about when people make it into an argument about rights, like, doesn't everybody have a right to eat whatever they want? How do you communicate effectively to those people who, kind of believe like, oh, I can do what I want? I'm sure you've encountered that.
Yeah, absolutely. I call this the personal choice argument. People are like, it's my personal choice to eat meat, right? This is the argument they're saying, oh, it's my personal choice. Don't infringe on my rights, as you were saying, that I have the right to eat meat. It's my personal choice. I find this a really interesting argument that I think actually, interestingly, I think it's kind of a newer argument because I don't remember hearing this back in the 90s. I've been vegan 33 years. I don't remember hearing this back in the 90s, the early 2000s as much. It was more just the arguments against whatever you're saying. It's like, no, the animals don't suffer or whatever the counterpoint was. But I think that that's a harder argument now. I think that it's harder for people to argue with what we're saying because they know it's true. So now this is kind of the go-to new argument that's like, well, it's my personal choice, right? When you can't really come back with countering the truth. So what I say to this though is that, a personal choice is like choosing what color socks to wear that day, or choosing whether you're going to eat cereal or pancakes for breakfast. That's a personal choice. When your choices start affecting others, other sentient beings, and starts harming other sentient beings, it stops being a personal choice anymore and starts being an ethical question, an ethical concern. And there are other beings' rights involved, not only your own rights, but the rights of animals to live free of suffering, right? So it's not really a personal choice to eat meat at all. It's actually a justice issue. It's an ethical issue. It is deeply personal to those animals involved. It's their personal choice that they want to live. They do not want to suffer. So, yeah.
Okay. And in your experience, what are the most effective tactics for promoting veganism and reducing meat consumption?
Oh boy, don't we wish we knew? This is a very tough question. I get this all the time, and nobody knows really. That's the answer. We do what we can. There are some studies and statistics and things that we can gather to make our informed choices. But my answer to this is really, I think the best thing someone can do if someone wants to help, if someone wants to go beyond just being vegan and they want to do more, first of all, the best thing to do is be vegan, right? So let's start there. But if you want to take it further and do more, I think the best thing to do is whatever inspires you and whatever is going to be sustainable for you, right? Whatever you're going to be able to do in a sustained method for a long time. If we tell everybody, oh, do this kind of activism, this is the best activism, you have to do this, and it's not something that people feel comfortable doing, or they don't want to do, or they're not going to do for a long period of time, they're going to do it a couple of times, not enjoy it, not go back, then that's not the best for them, right? It's not the best kind of activism. So I think that we have to look at individuals, what their talents are, what they're inspired by, what they have to offer, because the movement needs accountants, the movement needs graphic artists, the movement needs whatever your talents are, to volunteer or get a job and help with those talents. So that's kind of my answer to that one.
And how is the popularity of the plant-based movement, where people are eating, avoiding animals because of their health, which has become a lot more popular over the last decade or two, how has that made it easier to promote veganism?
Yeah, well, I know that this is an entire health conference. You can get a lot of information about health in this entire The Real Truth About Health conference. I am not a health expert in any way, and that's not what I focus on. So, my focus is the animals, the environment, justice, and I feel like there's a lot of studies, there's a lot of information out there on health, and that can bring people in, which is great, because we want to be healthy. It's good to be healthy. It's good to eat whole food, plant-based. But I have heard again and again and over from longtime vegans that what keeps them in is when they start to realize that this affects the animals, this affects the planet, that this is deeper and broader than just their health. And that's what keeps them in. So I think that it's really important to learn about these issues, to know about these issues, to be inspired by individual animal stories and the environmental impact, so that we can be inspired to maintain this lifestyle.
Okay. And do you feel encouraged or discouraged by the state of the animal rights movement and how it's been, the trajectory that it's on, and its successes that, and or failures that that they've seen over the last 33 years since you've gone vegan?
Yeah. Oh, that's a complicated question. I'll say overall, certainly inspired. I mean, I'm inspired every day by activists that are working in this movement. And, I certainly have seen some incredible progress, incredible growth. I mean, back in the 90s, when we would have like a conference like there wouldn't be a conference like this, first of all, back in the 90s. And if we did have some kind of an event, all 20 vegans would show up, and it would be twice a year. And it was a very small movement. We've grown so much now to see these incredible, huge conferences, huge progress in the food industry, in the government and laws. I mean, it's been amazing. It really has. The trajectory has been progressively positive. So yeah, overall, I'd say it's been wonderful. I actually interview on my podcast some inspirational people that are doing just incredible work in the movement. You get to meet these people and really hear about what they're doing on my podcast. So I encourage you to check my podcast to get more inspiration about people that are doing good work in the movement.
Okay. And last question. In your opinion, what is the most important thing that individuals can do to support the animal rights movement, regardless of their level of involvement?
It's a good question. It's an interesting question. I mean, of course, going vegan, that's kind of baseline. Just being vegan, eating vegan is very important. But I'd say beyond that, representing yourself as vegan, representing yourself as an animal supporter, an animal, not necessarily animal lover. I mean, we're animal lovers. Everybody's an animal lover, right? But beyond that, when you see something that is detrimental to animals, like in media, something that maybe talked about animals in a negative way or didn't give a voice to the animals, speaking out, saying something, writing to that publication or saying something in the conversation. If animals are not being represented well, or vegans are not being whatever it is, trying not to feel apologetic about being a vegan. We can be positive, we can be loving. We don't have to be, finger wagging and judgmental. But we should speak out. We should certainly speak out in a loving, compassionate way, and try to avoid being stereotypically finger wagging. It is difficult, I know, because we want to, say what we want to say, but using compassionate communication and nonviolent communication to speak out and to not let those moments, those critical moments in life where you see something that's wrong, you see an injustice, don't let those go by. Do something about it.
Great. Thank you so much. Please open up or unmute the audience. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you so much,
Thank you so much.
Molly.